You're listening to the Boss Yourself First podcast, Season 3, Episode 18. Welcome back to Boss Yourself First. Today is one I have been looking forward to for a really long time because I get to introduce you, and I say introduce, my friend has been on this podcast before, but it was before the hiatus. It was quite some time ago. We've done a lot of life since then. But I get to share with you one of my very dear friends, a brilliant thought leader, Sabine Gedeon. We met about 5 years ago, and from the beginning, I have admired her mix of wisdom and courage and calm strength. She's one of those people who can sit across from you and listen deeply and somehow help you see your next chapter more clearly. So professionally, let me tell you about my friend. Because I got some things to brag about, that this woman is my friend. Sabine is a transformational speaker. She's an executive coach and a leadership strategist. She has more than 20 years of experience guiding leaders and organizations in critical moments. And she's the founder of Gedeon Enterprises, the creator of Transformed Leadership Institute, and the author of Transformed, The Journey to Becoming, along with 2 other books on self-leadership and personal power. And I have to tell you, when Sabine and I met, I was in the early stages of writing my book, and she was so generous and encouraging, sharing her writing wisdom and helping me sort through the process. And this is what I love about my friend. Beyond the credentials and accomplishments, which there are many, Sabine brings such authenticity and grace to her work. She's just one of those rare leaders who helps you believe transformation is possible, not someday in the future, but right now. And it just gets better. And in 2025, Sabine was recognized as one of Influence Digest's top 15 coaches in San Diego. And if you know Sabine, it's not a surprise at all. Her work has been featured in national media, and her voice has become one that leaders seek when the path forward feels a little uncertain. Sabine, I am so happy to have you here, not just as a colleague, but as my friend. Welcome to Boss Yourself First. I should say welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Robyn. That is by far the most gracious, generous, loving introduction I've ever heard. So thank you so much, Fawn, for that beautiful reflection.
Of course, of course. And you are a transformation expert. And I feel like the foundation of that, and you can push back on this because I know you will, you need to. I feel like the foundation of that transformation is your personal experience and your continuing work of evolving yourself. And you also take others along with you. I can attest, Sabine encourages, inspires, and sometimes, in the nicest way possible, points out my growth opportunities. To be fair, I think we do that for each other. But would you share a little bit about your journey so our listeners can get the opportunity to know you and kind of where that passion for transformation comes from?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I won't go back to the, back in the 80s part of this, but high level, I grew up here in the US and migrated from Haiti, and most of my upbringing was really centered around the awareness or the understanding that I just had to prove myself. I had to continue to prove myself. And so that I did. First one to go to college, first one to, have this corporate job. Started in HR because I really wanted to help support people, and did that for about 12, 13 years before I decided to step out. But before I left HR, or before I left corporate, what really shifted for me was I saw myself growing my career in corporate America. I imagined from the very first day I started the company that I was at that I was going to be there till I retired. I did all the things. I did all the things that I was told to do, that my parents told me to do. Put your head down, work hard, you'll get recognized. And it didn't take long before I realized that is not the language of corporate America. And now, well-meaning as they were, they had never been in a corporate environment. So their advice was very limited. I will say it serves me in growing up, like in school and everything. But once I got to corporate America, I realized that there were different rules. And so that was probably my first unconscious period of having to evolve into that next layer of myself, because hard work wasn't going to get me to the next level. So I did all the things. I finally got to the place where I thought was the pinnacle of success, and only to realize that I had outgrown that vision of 22, 23-year-old me. And I found myself in this place where I didn't have a plan B. The overachiever only had plan A, nothing to fall back on. Didn't have a plan B. And so it forced me to really take a step back while I was having my mid career crisis and ask myself two questions. When have I felt the most alive and fulfilled? And when have I felt the most impactful? And those two questions literally changed my life because it came back to me over a period of time that I really enjoyed helping people figure out who they wanted to be, where they wanted to go, and then reverse engineering that. And then also when I was sitting behind closed doors with leaders and I got to see the human being behind the title, behind the ego, behind the bravado. And I was just like, wow, they really do need help. Matter of fact, they need more help than everyone else. And I just knew in the environment that I was in that I was never going to be able to fully embody the person that I knew was inside. And so I made the leap about 7 years ago. And believe it or not, I know you'll believe it, but this journey of entrepreneurship wasn't just a journey of entrepreneurship. It has been by far the greatest self development course that I could have ever taken because every step along the way, I've had to see me where I am, identify what got me there, and then make the choice, make a conscious choice to decide, do I want to stay at this version or do I want to elevate to the next? And then take that process. And so while I have been growing naturally, it's been my thing to want to help other people who are on that particular growth path to do so. So today I work with leaders in organizations, I work with leaders in businesses, and the real support, there's a mirroring between strategy and inner work. We'll call it that way, right? So I can help you identify where it is that you want to go, but I also know, having gone through the process and supported people, you can't take the same version of you today to that place. And so what does that mean? It's not just about setting the goal, it's who are you going to become, or who are you willing to become along the way to be able to achieve that particular goal. So that's the work that I do today with my clients.
Oh, I love that. And now my readers know why I love you so much. My readers, my listeners, because for one thing, she inspires me, she encourages me, and she's super clear about moving forward and becoming. And I think part of that process that you've been so generous with me, sharing the journey with me around what do I have to let go of to become and to move forward. I love how you said it, because this version of me is not going to take me into the next thing that I want, the impact I want to create and my vision for the future. So there is an element of evolution and transformation, as you said. And I have to share for a minute with our listeners, Sabine was graciously one of my early readers for my book. And so she knows all about my passion for permission. And I'm curious, Sabine, in your current stage, what permission are you giving yourself right now?
Oh, that's a really great question. Funny enough, because we've been talking about like my journey. I think I'm back from an elevated place of permission to feel. And reason being, as I've done a lot of work to, what do you call it, stabilize and regulate my nervous system, right? For someone who is very type A, and I'm not saying this about all people, but just me, for someone who's very type A, achievement driven, always hyper vigilant, there are so many things that went along with that. And I went through this period, probably about 2023, where I just couldn't stuff emotions down anymore. That I went on a journey of learning what it meant to feel and literally expanded my language of emotions beyond happy, mad, sad, angry. And so that was one layer of it. Now, in this space that I'm in, what I feel is, when I say permission to feel, it's not just the emotional side of it, but leaning into my intuition in a way that I had never known that I could before. Like from a discernment perspective, from a spiritual perspective, like I've always known to rely on that GPS, but I always saw it as almost something like information that was coming from outside of me. And now the shift is, can I trust how I feel? Like literally the physical sensations when I'm experiencing something or when something is presented to me, to give me, to be my GPS, to be my guide.
Mm.
So that's where I'm sitting with, what does that look like to fully lean into intuition and to co-create with my inner spirit versus having this expectation that it was going to come from the outside.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, there's a lot to unpack there, which we're not going to do right now, but there's just so much there. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it because it's almost like tuning in and trusting yourself to not only tune in, but to rest into and even act on the information and the interpretation of that information to lead you forward.
Yeah.
And I love that you pointed out that it's internal. It's internal information.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, as you know, it's a process, right? Or it's layers. And, I feel like there is a layer of feeling emotions and feeling what it is that you feel. And I feel like the deeper you go into that, then it's like being. There's an element of being in feeling as well, which is where I think I am.
Yes, absolutely. That integration of the feeling and the being. And it can be a challenge for someone who's super action oriented to really tune in and notice and sit in the being. So, okay, you and I could go on for ages, but I don't want to blow the opportunity for my listeners to learn not just about you, but from you as well. Although I think they've probably already been inspired based on the things that you've been sharing. But I am thrilled to dive in with you today because your work sits right in that intersection of what we've been talking about a lot here, the self-leadership, transformation, and the power of becoming. And part of that becoming that we haven't discussed yet in this season of Permission is building capital, but a particular kind of capital, social capital. And I don't feel like that's a phrase you hear kind of bantered around. So, could you explain what you mean when you talk about social capital?
Absolutely. So and this started out of necessity, right? So the evolution of this was like, what does it look like to be an effective networker? To what does it look like to actually be someone who can leverage social capital? So I'm going to refer to it in the context of business. And so
Mm.
I believe that business, the language of business is the language of relationships, right? So you can have a hotel with a whole bunch of fancy rooms and, upholstery and all that. If you don't have employees in there, you don't have a business. You just have a building, right? And so if you think about it from that context, many of us over the course of our lifetime, we touch, we meet, we engage with so many different people. And the social capital actually came from a place where I realized that being the hard worker and putting my head down and being willing to grind, that there was a moment where I stopped and I was just like, somebody's done this already. Somebody knows the answer. Somebody can connect me to this, right? Why am I feeling like I have to figure all these things out versus seeing the people in my network and the relationships I built as an opportunity not to necessarily use someone but to leverage, right? And so I'm a big believer if you think about social capital in the sense of building long-term deeper relationships so that if and when you need support or whatever it is that they can help you. So I subscribe to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the deposits and withdrawals, right? So if you think about social
Yes.
capital, think about it in the sense of, you're not just going to go to your network or your friend group or whatever it is and just say, hey, can you get me a job? Or hey, can you give me a referral? Or hey, can you do that? I mean, you can, but you'll probably alienate them, right? And so this is
Mm.
about being strategic and identifying individuals that you have mutually beneficial interests with that you can support and have that win-win reciprocation. So the deposits and withdrawals, the mindset is, not just reaching out to your network when you need something, but being very strategic of regular, consistent check-ins, whatever that looks like, giving resources and being that giver, having that giver's mindset so that you can build up your account when you're ready to make a withdrawal, you can make withdrawal. What I've learned in my business, this has been the basis of most of my business. It's not just about building a referral based business. It's about building deep relationships where, you and I actually started where I think I was just reaching out to people who were like
Yeah.
millennial coaches or whatever. And you came up on LinkedIn. And here we are 5 years later having deepened that relationship. I was actually just talking about you last night. I was just like, if I were stuck in a jail in Dominican Republic, this is where we're talking about like, there are probably a few people that I know would like try to help me out, right? And you were one of them. And that just started from a LinkedIn outreach, right? And so that's what I call the like physical embodiment of social capital that over time we've poured into each other in exchanges where now we have this We have this bank account that I can withdraw from, you can withdraw from. In the context of business, it's so important because as long as you're doing business, you're going to be doing business with people. And if you don't have any deposits in, it's going to be really, really hard to continue to grow and build your business. And it's true for people who are in corporate as well.
Yes. I love that. I'm gonna reflect back just for a second that relationship is the language of business. Did I say
Yeah.
that right?
Mhm.
Relationship is the language of business. Okay. I really appreciate the picture of making deposits. And I also appreciate, because if you think about how to grow a bank account, they just don't have to be massive things. These are small, consistent, and I just think you emphasize that beautifully, deposits that build up your capital with others in your network. So lovely. Thank you for kind of helping us understand what that means, social capital. And just so you know, if you didn't already know what you probably do, Sabine, here this season we've been talking about the permission principles from the book. You're very familiar with those: approach, adjust, and act. And I kind of want to let that be a structure or a skeleton that we hang our episode on about building social capital. So we've started the approach anyway, because we understand what it is. But I want to lean into the integration of social capital, identity, and mindset. And I think you touched on it when you were talking, but I want to go a little deeper. Specifically, you have taught that there's power in approaching leadership identity with curiosity instead of control. I think that's a pretty big adjustment, to be honest. For many of us in many areas, we like control. But could you share with us, how does the mindset of that, how does it help leaders get curious, and how does it help them build authentic relationships?
Yeah, great question. So, mindset, whenever I teach, I always say I believe that mindset is 80 to 90% of success, right? In any endeavor that we take on, you can have the
Yeah.
best laid out strategy, but if your mindset isn't aligned with it, like there's going to be self sabotage or you won't achieve it. I mean, for someone who is like
Right.
taken people's courses and done it like 100% and didn't get the results. So mindset is huge. Here's how I would tie all those together, right? So when you're thinking about your social capital, your relationships, right? Are you the type of person who builds relationships or who approaches relationships from the perspective of what can I get out of this person? Or are you the type of person who takes that step back and says, okay, here's who this person is or what avenues or whatever it is that they have that could potentially be beneficial before I approach this person. Let me take a step back and do a real I call it a value assessment of what I bring to the table. And so when you're thinking about social capital, and hopefully I answer the question because now my mind is taking me somewhere else. Most people, they either, if they are in need of support or they want to leverage their network, they don't know how. Or they will talk themselves out of approaching their network because it's I don't want to bother them, or I don't know what to say, or I don't want, all of these things are happening in the mind before you even
Yeah.
approach that person. And I'm a firm believer. I like to believe that everyone genuinely wants to help you, right? So you start off with that mindset that people genuinely want to help you. However, they have lives, they have businesses, they have things going on, which are true, but that doesn't preclude them from wanting to help you. So in the value assessment, I offer clients the opportunity to go through what are your skills? Like, what are you good at? What's your knowledge, right? What's some special expertise that you have? What are your strengths? What do people come to you repeatedly for? What are you known for? And then what are your opportunities? Where do you actually have gaps? And when you can take a step back and do your own internal assessment of what you bring to the table, it's about you building the confidence to know what you're bringing to the table, what you can offer, and then also where you can ask people to fill in some particular gaps. And so the connectors, I call it the connectors mindset. The connectors mindset, that's 85% of the work. That's you focusing
Wow.
on you before you
Hmm.
even reach out and have a conversation with someone, before you send a LinkedIn notice or whatever the case may be. I want you to spend the bulk of the time because when you approach someone, so if I approach Robyn, I'm not going to say, hey, Robyn, like, this is what I'm doing with my business. Like, who do you know? I'm gonna be like, wow, Robyn, you just released a book. I'm gonna grab the book and I'm going to go ahead and leave a review. And I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. Right. And so that's the approach. So then maybe down the line, Robyn remembers Sabine brought the book. We had a conversation about it. All these things happen. And now I say, you know what? Do you know anyone who does such and such? And so that
Yeah.
is me being able to look at what I'm good at. Well, that's not really a strength. I mean, I just love to read. So that would have been an easy one for me. Would have been a real easy one for me. But that's the mindset around it. That's the getting curious, right? You're not necessarily getting curious about I mean, you are getting curious about other people, but I feel like the curiosity starts with you. And it's funny, as many times as I've done this, so many people, especially on the strength side, we discount our strengths, right? Because it
Mm.
comes easy to us. It's the thing that, like, it's just so like, oh, that doesn't matter. Like, everybody knows that. And that's the very thing, that's the very gift, that's the very talent that you have to share. So, social capital is not an overnight thing, it's not a short term play, it's a long term play. But the bulk of the time, is centered around you building confidence on what you're bringing to the table so that you can communicate that to others in a way that is authentic, in a way that is clear, in a way that allows them to see how they can help you.
Lovely. That okay, again, so much to unpack. But I think what really resonated with me, well, several things, but what I want to start with is this idea that, the work starts here and the curiosity, because when I was formulating that question and I was thinking about it, I was thinking about how do I get curious about people, but it doesn't start that way. It's how do I get curious about myself? And I love that you point out that a lot of times we just fly by our strengths. Our brains are wired to notice that our weaknesses are threats.
Mhm.
They're areas where we're vulnerable, and our brain works hard to help us remember those. So we have to intentionally sometimes really look for those strengths. And you're right, we get blind spots around them because we think it's easy for everyone to do that. And
Mhm.
it's not. Whatever that gift is, it's not easy for everyone. And that's often some of my work, especially with my students when they come in and they're kind of new to coaching and we're talking about strengths. That's some of the work that we do is let's actually notice that this is not a strength everyone has.
Mhm.
This is a gift, as you say, and this is a gift that you can leverage to support other people, to pour into other people because they don't have that gift.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a beautiful start to building social capital, and not at all where I thought we were going to start. So I love that. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, I want to move us into the adjustment phase, although I feel like we've kind of transitioned a little bit into that adjustment because we're talking about mindset, and
Mhm.
mindset we know is the beginning, right? But when you talk about redefining networking as relationship building in that language of business relationship, I think it's so interesting. And I really, really want to hear from you. What kind of shifts or what kind of adjustments are needed for leaders to stop collecting contacts? And you think about, I know it's olden days when you would all take your business cards to a networking event and actually hand out business cards, but to just stop thinking of networking as that. I think we still, even though rarely do you hand someone a business card, we still think like that,
Mhm.
but start, instead of collecting contacts, to start cultivating community. So what needs to shift?
Yeah, well, first mindset is that,
Yeah.
right? Networking traditionally, it's associated with transaction, right? Which is why for some people it's like a four-letter word, right? They hear networking and they start to cringe because they see going into a room, having a plate of cheese and crackers and a glass of wine. And then right when you put something in your mouth, somebody walks up to you like, hey, what do you do? Right. And so well, we were taught about networking and having your elevator pitch and all of that, like
Yes.
that piece or that element of it, it still exists in some places, but I feel like the pandemic shifted that, right? Because
Mm.
then you didn't have those safety nets. And even 5 years later, or however many years later, I feel like we're still in it or tail end of it. People are now trying to reorient, well, when we are in person, what are the rules of engagement? How do I navigate this in a way that feels authentic, because most people, the old way of networking, they would tell you like, I hated doing it, I just did it because I had to, because it was part of my business, it was part of my job. I learned networking because I started in recruiting, so I had to go to career fairs and networking events and whatnot, and so that was just, I very transactional. So there are two types of, I'll call them networkers for the sake of it, because I feel like network, if you think about networking, it's all about quantity, right? It's all about quantity. Social capital becomes the quality. So you have to network, right, to get the quantity, the numbers, if you will. But the acts and the strategy that you put in place to move certain people, not everybody, into that social capital bucket, that takes effort, that takes time. And so that's where it's going to be the quality relationships for networking. So I'll speak to it as business owners, right? So you have two types of networkers. You have individuals who are part of every organizational group, like they are, like everywhere you go, that you see them, they're still collecting business cards, they are connecting with people on LinkedIn, maybe 3 to 4 nights, they are doing network activities, and then they're kind of like in the hustle and the grind. These are the people, and I was that person at one point too, that's a recipe for burnout. These are the people where it is very clear, even their initial engagement with you, that this is about like whatever the business or the communication, and then you don't hear from them. Yeah, don't do that. Only, and I'm saying don't do that because one, people feel that, and also that can't feel good for you and your body and your emotions and everything, right? Then there are the networkers who, or the people who go to networking events, and maybe they're strategic where they say, you know, I'm going to meet 3 people. I'm going to intentionally introduce myself to 3 people this evening, and I'm going to strike a conversation of value. And then I'm going to follow up with that person on LinkedIn and maybe an email, right? So that takes it from, all right, I got to get as many business cards as possible, to now I'm going to be strategic in having 3 conversations. The shift there, or the opportunity there, is sometimes people get busy, right? So you meet someone at a conference. There's the ICF conference happening here this week. So I'm going to go to that. I'm probably going to meet a lot of new coaches, right? Will we still be in touch 6 months from now? Maybe not. Maybe not. But I have a system in place from the time that I meet them, collect their business card, or reach out to them on LinkedIn, where at least for the next 6 months, there are going to be touch points. Now, I'm doing the outreach, I'm leaving it up to them to decide whether or not they want to engage with me. And because I'm meticulous in my tracking, I'll know this is not a relationship right now that needs to be built. And then I can move forward. So I think there's, even in what I'm doing and the way that I'm doing, I always say that while I use systems and technology and all these things to manage it, right? Because I need that, it's still human touch. It's still genuine human touch. I'll give you one last example and then we'll move on. I met this lady 3 years ago at an event. Someone was celebrating like a business milestone, and I met her, and she had just moved here to San Diego. In the organization that she works for, there had been only one other woman in the space that did what she did. And I just remember that conversation. Like, she was literally months new here. And I felt for her because I know what it's like to be new here in San Diego. And so we've connected on LinkedIn. We've engaged, very rarely. And then I go to a networking event earlier this year, and someone who I met was just like, oh, you should connect with such and such. Let me know if you want an introduction. And I'm like, wait a minute, I know who that is. And I was just like, oh no, I don't need an introduction. I know who she is. And so I'll reach out. So I reached out to her. She didn't get back to me, but then something triggered this person to still make an introduction, right? So I was like, okay, cool. Make the introduction. Her and I get on. Now, mind you, this is 3 years. I probably talked to her for 20 minutes after being here for, 3 months or whatever. And so I had recollected, and I didn't go back to look at anything. I remember she had just moved from Dallas. I remember all these details, and she was just like, wow, like you have such a great memory. Like you need to bottle that up. And I was just like, well, yeah, I do have a great memory, but I also listened because I understood. I put myself in your place when I was having that conversation with you, and understanding what it's like to be new here, starting a business, all of those things. So I immediately, there was a resonance, if you will, in your situation. That's why I remember those things. And so now our conversations are completely different. So that's what I mean about, networking with intention and being present and listening to people, and then, creating your system so that you can continue to keep in touch. Now, the last 3 years, we haven't been in touch. Now, for the next 6 months, I'm going to track and see, okay, is this someone who who wants to be in my ecosystem and in my orbit? Yes. And if no, that's okay too. When the time is right for us to reconnect, we will.
Oh, that was fantastic. And it was such a beautiful transition because I heard about the adjusting from quantity to quality,
Mhm.
and that needed that presence and the listening and the intentionality around that. But you also start talking about systems, which I predicted that you would, because if I need a system, this is the woman I come to. And she has systems thinking down. I would say that is definitely one of your gifts. But that leads me into, because I like to be super practical, and that leads us into ACT. What are some sort of, you talk a little bit about relational authority, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that you sort of define that as leading through trust rather than title. And it sounds like that when you talk about the intention that you go in with, and the way that you listen, and the way that you identify with people, and your full presence. What are some daily practices? Because we're trying to do kind of almost micro practices that support our listeners in changing their influence trajectory.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'll give the high level, right? So if I can just paint the picture, right? You go to a networking event, you meet a few people that you're interested in, right? So the first step while you're there or the night after, connect with that person on LinkedIn, right? At the very least, and don't just send a connection request. Say, hey, it was so great meeting you at dot 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 event. Looking forward to staying engaged with you on this platform. That's what I do. I actually have a thing that's saved so that I can even like just copy and save and insert the thing on my phone while I'm there.
While you're there,
While I'm there.
so good.
Yes.
Okay.
And why is this important? So that LinkedIn tracks the messages. So that let's just say 3 months from now, I want to reach out to this person. I'm not like, oh, wait, who is this? Now I have a record of, where I met that person, right? So this is like back in the day when we used to get a resume and like we put something on the back of the resume, or you got someone's card and you put notes on the card. That's how I do
Mhm.
it. From the time that you meet them on or connect with them on LinkedIn, then the opportunity is I would, we had a really great conversation. I would love to continue it. If they're local, do you want to do coffee? Do you want to do lunch? Do you even want to do a virtual coffee, even if they're local? But the goal is to then have a conversation with that person that allows you to learn more about the person. Because I'm assuming at the networking event, it was probably centered around business or like your professional life. But
Mhm.
this is your opportunity to learn more about that person. When you're having that conversation with that person, the key thing to ask is if they're a business owner, if I'm talking to someone, how will I know that they're a good referral for you? That's a really great question to ask that immediately sends them into place like, oh my gosh, this person is looking out for referrals for me, right? If it's not someone who's in corporate, you can say, how might I support you? What do you have going on right now that I could be of support to you? So immediately in that conversation, you are just simply asking so that you can understand what you can give. And in those cases too, sometimes you may not have the answer for that person. But what you can do is say, you know what, thank you for sharing that with me. I will keep an eye on that. And if someone pops up, I will definitely let you know. They're also going to reciprocate that question most of the time. I would say 98% of the time, people are astute enough to be like, well, how can I help you? Other times, it's okay if they don't. But this is where the value assessment comes in handy because you
Right.
need to go prepared with, oh, well, I've been working on such and such. And, based on our conversation or based on what I saw on your LinkedIn or based on whatever, would you have any insight on this? Or would you be open? I noticed we have a mutual connection. Would you be open to reintroducing? So you want to go into that conversation, that virtual coffee, the in person, whatever, with a give first. And then if you were asked, have your asked ready. And then the key
Okay.
piece to that is to actually follow up. Do the thing that you said that you were going to do. So if you offer to make an introduction, make that introduction. If you offer to make whatever, do whatever it is. And then once they do whatever it is for you, responding back to that. The last piece to that is my system. I call it my Fab Five, my Core 40, and my Essential 55, right? So my top 100 people. My Core 40 are what I would call like my circle of influence. They include clients, they include, people that I've built relationships with over time. The Essential 55 are the people who maybe I've met at an event, maybe we've gotten to that place of coffee, and I was just like, okay, this is someone that I want to like stay connected to. And so I have a system where I reach out to five of my core 40 and five of my essential 55 every week. So it's in my calendar. This is
Wow.
another important thing. It's locked into my calendar because what gets scheduled gets done, right? So it's locked in my calendar at the beginning of the week, 10 outreaches. And those 10 outreaches could just be like, hey, it's been a while. What's new? Hey, saw that you just got a promotion. Just wanted to say congratulations. It could be via email. It could be on LinkedIn. It could be as casual as possible. But just think about it. I'm just making a small deposit into this person in this moment. Sometimes they'll come back. Oh, let's do lunch. Let's do whatever. But you have the entire week to move through that. And so I feel like I could go deeper, but that's an essential piece. So that's how you take someone from a networking event to connecting with them on LinkedIn to having a virtual coffee and then keeping regular touch points with that person. And you'll see over time, like this is mutually beneficial, or maybe this is not someone that wants to engage right now. And then they just move off the list.
I love it. Thank you. I was thinking that and you addressed it. First of all, it starts with your work, your values assessment, your value assessment in that what am I bringing? And also what is my ask? I heard that in there that when you're going to go, you're not going to force it on people, but if you get asked, if they turn that question around, you're going to be able to say, well, here it is, and you need to be able to articulate it. So a little preparation is involved there. And I think being clear on that is a pretty regular practice because it could update as you go along. Second, when you're at the event, this is a question. When you're at the event and you text them, hey, it was so great having a chat with you about this. Is there a because it's a connection request, right? On LinkedIn is your
Mm-hmm.
first one. Okay. So if they don't respond, if you get crickets, do you still move them up the list to, I'm going to follow up and see if we can set up a conversation, whether it's virtual or in person?
No, you have to look at it as you're collecting data on
Okay.
the likeliness of this turning into an actual relationship, right? So if you
Okay.
are meeting at the event and you send them a LinkedIn connection request and it's been a month or 2 months and they haven't responded, then that's not a connection that you're going to
Okay.
continue to move forward with. Unless maybe they gave you their business card and then maybe you can send them an email first if you haven't. Because some people also, I have met people at networking events that they don't check their LinkedIn. I don't know how they live that way, but apparently it's possible. They're just not
Who
active
knew?
on LinkedIn, which is fine. But if you have that business card, there's nothing stopping you from doing the same thing via email as a check-in.
Okay.
The point of this is every step along the way, like you're doing a temperature check, right? This is not just about, following the system. You're also gut checking, is this person that I really see that I can contribute or add value to them and the work that they're doing? As much as it is, can they add value to the work that I'm doing, right? We're bombarded with so much these days that,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's the moving through the process is to get you to the place where you have a quality set of individuals that you feel
Right.
comfortable, confident, built that trust that you would refer business to them, they would refer business to you, or if you need a referral or an introduction, they would do that for you. You don't have to necessarily get to the place where they'll bail you out of a foreign jail just yet, but
But
you're
I'm coming for you, Sabine. I'm not leaving you in that foreign jail. I am coming for you.
so yeah. So that's why I track everything. I think that's an important piece too, that this is where people kind of get stuck where they're like, well, is that really human? Yes, it is, because if you're not tracking, then you don't know, and it's so easy to get bombarded by other things. This is where I think
Yeah.
people default to transactional networking, because there's actually work behind the networking that needs to get done so that you can show up authentically human.
I love it. Thank you, friend. This has been so good. And I appreciate you and your generosity helping us learn about how to build social capital and to learn about you and be inspired by you. Are you up for a quick lightning round?
Ooh, yes. Let me
All
sit.
right. All right. Here we go. A book you'd recommend to someone in a season of becoming.
Ooh. So many.
I know you're a reader.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go with Ted. It's the first one that comes out of my mind. The Empowerment Dynamic by David Emerald. That, yeah, that book changed my life. I mean, a lot of books changed my life, but that book changed my life in a way that I had not anticipated. Followed by Atomic Habits.
Oh, yes, also agree. Okay, one word that anchors your leadership right now. One word.
Trust.
Yeah. And then finish the sentence. Connection is,
Everything.
I love it. Sabine, every time we talk, I walk away reminded that leadership and life are built on connection. You're right, it's everything. So, for those listening who want to keep learning from you or just be a part of the world you're building, what is the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I do accept requests from people, and let me know you heard me on the Boss Yourself First podcast. So it's Sabine Gedeon. You can search me. I'm the only one, and I have the blue butterfly, so that's how you know it's me.
Love it. All right. So I'm going to wrap us up here and I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. If you're feeling that tug, that sense that it's time to expand your circle, to let yourself be seen, I want you to take that as your permission slip this week. Permission to reach out, to start a conversation, and to remember that connection is one of the bravest leadership moves you can make. Thanks for listening, everyone. Sabine, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Robyn. It's been a pleasure.
Me too. Always. Take care, everyone.